So in the first couple of weeks of class, we went over things like comma splices, run-ons, etc., etc. As I've been reading through different classes of writing, I've been noticing that sentence fragments are becoming a frequent error as well. So a sentence fragment is pretty much an incomplete sentence. It's a word group that is incorrectly punctuated as if it were a complete sentence, beginning with an initial capital letter and ending with a period. So basically, it's half a sentence. So you might have the predicate of your sentence. You might have the subject of your sentence. Remember, in English, right, you always have to have a subject, a verb, and an object. A subject, a verb, and an object. So what does a sentence fragment look like? You see on this handout an example. Michelle came into the room, closed the door, period. Close the door is a sentence fragment. It's not a complete sentence. You could say she closed the door or Michelle closed the door, but if you just said close the door, period, that's not a complete sentence. Okay. So there's lots of ways that you can, if you do have problems with sentence fragments, there's lots of ways that you can go in and fix it. As you see, this person put a comma and added an ing on. So Michelle came into the room, comma, closing the door behind her. So she puts a comma there because it's a phrase after it. So avoid making these sentence fragments, these incomplete sentences. Most of the time when I notice them, I think there's actually something on this handout about that. Most of the time when I notice them, they start with an ing word, okay? So this part here is about completing a sentence fragment that doesn't have a verb. So the assembly person in our district, period. What does the assembly person in the district do? Like the assembly person in the district works diligently. The statue standing in the rotunda of the building. So if you just have the ing verb there, right, standing, it needs a helper verb with it, right? So the statue is standing in the rotunda of the building. As I told you guys before, though, in cutting clutter, it's usually best to avoid the ing words, right? So I would even fix that by saying the statue stands in the rotunda of the building, rather than saying is standing. I would say stands. Because remember, the is plus ing words or was plus ing words, that's oftentimes a way of cluttering up your sentences. But oftentimes, like I said, oftentimes I'll see sentence fragments that'll start with the ings. So I'll see sentences that says standing in the rotunda of the building, period. Right. Well, what's standing in the rotunda of the building? The statue. Sometimes you need to just spell it out. I think lots of times people will do those because it does, sentence fragments do kind of sound natural to the ear, but grammatically speaking, on the page, they're incorrect, even though we do this all the time in our spoken language. On the written word is different than the spoken language. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm actually getting ready to talk about prepositional phrases with you all, but lots of times sentence fragments will happen with prepositional phrases too. So sometimes you might start a prepositional phrase but not finish it. So after Maria bought the biology book, well, you might kind of expect something to follow that, right? After Maria bought the biology book, comma, she passed the test. That's kind of like how a prepositional phrase works, right? It gives you extra information in a sentence. Lots of times people will put a preposition in front of a sentence and make it a prepositional phrase, but then put a period at the end. So a good way to fix that is just simply cut the preposition. So Maria bought the biology book, or finishing the sentence even, right? She began studying for her exam. So again, watch out for those. If I write sentence fragments on your papers, as I did often with the paper ones, you go in and fix them up. I think that's all that I need to cover with that sheet. Now let me go to the browser. Damn, we're down to 3 people. Oh, Lord. I know I'm boring, but come on. Let's see. All right. So prepositional phrases. So anytime that you start a sentence with a prepositional phrase, you're supposed to put a comma at the end. So in order to know what a preposition is, you kind of have to know the different ones. So there's a big list that I came up that I pulled up here. Different types of prepositions: after, above, aboard, at, before. Yeah, my 8th grade English teacher used to say, how do you know it's a prepositional phrase? Right, you can kind of ask the question, where would a cat go, right? Across the street, among the people, at the park. Right, so you know that a prepositional phrase, it's a preposition if you can kind of answer that question starting with that word. By the dish bowl.
In progress.
Through the house, right? Underneath the steps. So I would actually recommend you guys maybe even like print off a list of prepositional phrases, kind of like that I did here. That way, when you write your own sentences, you go back and check for grammar and stuff, you'll know when you're using them. Let's see. There's actually, let me actually pull up a Word document for you now. So the question is, when do you use prepositional phrases? When, especially commas with them. So let's take, for instance, I'm just going to make something up off the top of my head. Okay, after going to the donut shop, the cop now had energy to give more tickets. All right, we'll pick on cops today because why not? I haven't gotten a ticket recently, by the way, so there's no angst here. I just like to play along with the stereotypes. Right? So anytime that you start a sentence with a prepositional phrase, you're supposed to put a comma after the phrase. Okay, after going to the donut shop, comma, the cop now had energy to give more tickets. So, like I said, anytime you start a sentence with one of these phrases, put the comma. The function of the prepositional phrase is to give some extra information for the subject here. All right, so this is almost like serving as an adjective for the cop. Right, it's extra information we need to know about the cop. However, if we wrote the sentence this way, the cop now had energy to give more tickets after going to the donut shop. So notice here, we pretty much just flip the order the phrase goes in. Well, if you put it at the end of the sentence rather than the beginning of the sentence, you don't have to put the comma. Right? So it depends where in the sentence you place the phrase. Right? Most of the time, it's better practice to put it at the beginning of the sentence. I think it's better practice, better style. Your sentences are less likely to get cluttered up that way. So either way is not technically incorrect. However, I do recommend when you write these sentences, put them at the beginning and put the commas with them. I've just noticed as I've read through a buku of essays over the past couple of weeks, not just this class, but others, I've noticed a lot of people just don't put the commas after the phrases. Usually the general rule of thumb is that there's a pause, right? Put a comma in there. Going to the donut shop. The cop now had energy to give more tickets. So again, if it's beginning of the sentence, if it's at the beginning, put the comma. If it's in the later part of the sentence, you don't have to. Questions about that? This will probably be the subject for the next quiz whenever I give the next one. So the next thing up then is what's called apposition, right? And a positive. And a positive is when you give extra information in the middle of the sentence that you could cut out of the sentence. Right, extra information in the middle of the sentence that you can cut it out. So so let's just say the cop needing more energy to give tickets went to the donut shop. All right, so when you write the sentence this way, notice that I put commas around. All right, putting the commas around it suggests that you can cut that out of the sentence. So the cop went to the donut shop. Well, the sentence still makes sense. All right, even if you take the needing more energy to give tickets part out. So again, if you put the phrase kind of in the middle of the sentence, put commas around it to show that it can be cut. So that's called putting a sentence in apposition. So to recap, right? If it's at the beginning, put the comma. If it's at the end of the sentence, you don't have to. If it's in the middle and it's something that you can cut and the sentence still makes sense, put commas around it. Lots of times I'll see errors where you don't put the comma, right? The cop needing more energy to give tickets went to the donut shop. You really need the commas there to show that it's information that can be cut. So I suppose this is my second lesson to you on commas. Right? I went over comma splices in the first couple of weeks. Now here's some other instances where you're supposed to use commas correctly. So I get tired of inserting random commas in the papers. Right. The last thing I want to talk about is the Oxford comma. The Oxford comma. The Oxford comma is when you have a list of 3 or more. Right. So Courtney, Gavin, and Jeff went to go see the new Halloween film. I haven't seen it yet, by the way. So if you have, don't spoil it for me. I'm going to see it this coming weekend. And you guys probably know I'm a big horror buff. I got my Evil Dead poster here in my office, right? But the Oxford commas is when you have a list of 3 or more things. And technically, you're supposed to put a comma with the and, right? So if you don't put this second comma here, it kind of messes up the meaning of the sentence. So some people will argue that you don't need it. Let's say that I cut that out. Courtney, comma, Gavin, and Jeff went to go see the new Halloween film. Lots of people will say the and functions the same as a comma. Not really, right? You do need this second comma in a list of 3 or more things. So they call that the Oxford comma. Some people argue that you need it. Some people argue that you don't. I personally think that you need it. Okay. So that basically sums it up as far as some of what I wanted to cover today with commas, with prepositional phrases, as well as sentence fragments. So that was a good little chunk there. Before I let you guys go, before main class, just let me go ahead and take a quick tally here of who's here. You guys have any questions for me about not only commas or anything, but any other class business that I can address before main class begins? All right, so we'll see you guys again in an hour at 3:30. See you guys then. Caden, before you go, we can talk about your topic if you want. Nope, she left.